Dr. Lilyana Amezcua is an associate professor of neurology, a diversity, equity, and inclusion champion, and the division chief for neuroimmunology and multiple sclerosis at the University of Southern California Keck School of Medicine. Dr. Amezcua spearheaded the Alliance for Research in Hispanic MS and serves as principal investigator. The Alliance for Research in Hispanic MS is focused on better defining racial and ethnic health disparities by examining modifiable factors like social determinants of health and environmental factors from non-modifiable genetic factors involved in MS severity and progression, specific to the Hispanic and Latino population. And we're going to be talking about that in just a moment. But first, welcome to ACTRIMS 2025 and welcome back to Real Talk MS.
Thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be here and be able to talk about something so dear to my heart.
Well, let's get started. Tell me what the Alliance for Research in Hispanic MS is all about.
It's really about bringing together those with similar thoughts and researchers. And this started off more than 5 years ago, actually, where I was getting started trying to better understand Hispanic population locally in California, and at the same time there were others that were quite interested in doing the same, and this was Dr. Jacob McCauley at University of Miami and Dr. Angel Chinea in Puerto Rico. So we all had similar ideas as to how we should approach this issue of underrepresentation of a population that was fast growing in the United States, but also in our understanding that they also get MS. And so we basically came together and we decided to call it the Alliance for Research in Hispanic MS. And then from there, we started aligning our clinical data collection as well as our biosamples.
Collaboration seems to make everything better. I've noticed, especially when you're dealing with MS care, MS treatment, MS therapies, so that's a great idea.
Absolutely.
So you're the lead author in a paper that was just published a couple of weeks ago titled Person-Centered Social Determinants and Neighborhood Deprivation Associated with Disability in Hispanic People with Multiple Sclerosis. It's a long title of an important paper. I've known about social determinants of health, but I haven't encountered person-centered social determinants of health. Can you explain what that means and what your paper explored?
Absolutely. So, and as you know, John, social determinants of health are those factors that people are born to, grow to, and live to age and die, right? And they have become rather important in our understanding and how they may affect whether it's disease, disability, in MS, and any other condition. They really are a big part of how you either deal with it or are able to be resilient. And so in MS, we've come to understand that they are a big part of why we have either health disparities, whether it's by race or by age. There's these differences. And so a lot of our understanding of these social determinants of health comes also from looking at just neighborhood. There's a lot of studies that have focused at looking at what we call indices, so using geocoded data to better understand where people live, zip code, and from there inferencing what might that look like and their effect on, in this case, disability measures. And so we've been quite interested in understanding that, but you know, when we're thinking about, okay, if we do find that, how would make a solution or create a solution if it's not really patient-centered or individualized, right? And if we want to start learning about interactions, we need to go deeper than just geocoding. I do think geocoding has a place. Maybe it's a place to start understanding that there's differences. But the other aspect is that, unfortunately, a lot of neighborhoods in the US, maybe not all, were not done at random. They were either a result of segregation or redlining in certain regions, right? And so it might just capture that and may not give us enough information as to what we would need to solve. And so we went ahead and took 170 Hispanic patients with early MS. We're really talking about a really young population in their 30s with disease less than 5 years. On average, they had 2 years with disease. And we wanted to better understand They're person-centered. And what we call person-centered was basically factors that we were going to understand about them. What is their language? What is their household? How many people live in their house? Employed? Are they not? So really individualized and centered, as opposed to just looking at their zip code. We also did look at their zip code, and we estimated what we call the social deprivation index. There's variations out there. There's social vulnerability, there's deprivation, there's the area deprivation index. They all are very similar, but they mean something different, or they were basically made for different purposes. So the deprivation index was made to try to assess what resources are needed in the area. The area deprivation recently has, some difficulties because I guess its major focus is housing, and so that may be some deficit to consider in the future. But in this case, we took the social deprivation index and we also looked at person-centered. And we wanted to understand, okay, which one is really associated with different levels of disability. In this case, EDSS, which is our more common disability scale. We also looked at 25-foot walk. We also looked at the Hauser ambulatory scale, which should be the same. If you're going to see it in the EDSS, we're going to see it in the 25-foot walk, right? And the Hauser. And so then we also looked at SDMT, which is a symbol digit modality test, which is for cognitive. And then we looked at different models. And we tried to estimate person-centered factors based on their weight. And so, for example, the principal components, one, and maybe this is too much detail, but basically what we found was that 20 to 60% of the variability could be explained by social determinants of health in terms of who is doing worse, so meaning they're slower in their walking, higher EDSS, higher SDMT scores. They could all be explained by these factors, and depending on these factors where they were mapped was contributing greater variability. In this case, in the Hispanic population, what came to be was that socioeconomic status and assimilation factors, which has to do with language, right, that has to do probably with health literacy, are rather important for this population. And they have a greater effect in their disability levels than other types of social determinants of health. So you can look at every social determinant of health, but not each one is as important. And in this case, these are rather important. The assimilation actually means that we need to do more health education, health literacy, which is practically what you're doing. And so that's sort of the nuts and shells of this paper, but it's just telling us that we need to go deeper for future studies to better understand person-centered as opposed to just doing geocoding.
That makes sense. Sometimes it feels like when we talk about social determinants of health, it's easier, far easier to identify the problem than to implement solutions.
That's right.
But I think this is really important work, and I'll give everybody a sneak peek at something I didn't know I'd be talking about to you. But as a matter of fact, dealing with health literacy, we're going to be launching Spanish language version of Real Talk MS because about a year and a half ago you suggested I think about doing that. So I took your suggestion and we're going to launch it with this episode.
Oh my God, this is amazing. So let me know how I can help. I can speak Spanish, and I would be happy to connect this with the Alliance for Research in Hispanic MS. And really, I think this will definitely have a huge impact to the population, which this is what they've been asking for.
Well, Dr. Lilyana Amezcua, thank you for all you do to improve the lives of people living with MS, even when it means asking hard questions. And thanks so much for talking with me today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.